Welcome to the Beacon Podcast. Deborah Jane East and Ari Kopel are voices in the wilderness for positive change and a better future. Thank you for listening. And now, here are your hosts.
Hello, this is Deborah Jane East of the Beacon Podcast, and I am very happy to be here with my co-host, Ari Kopel. How are you today, Ari? I hope you've had a good weekend.
I had a good weekend. I'm looking forward to this particular podcast because it's extremely important. So, yeah, a little somber about the topic, but yeah, we must speak about it.
Yep, we have to. And I might mention, my heart goes out to all the people on the East Coast that are dealing with this horrible air quality. It's just been devastating for, people, especially seniors and children. North Carolina now has over 16,000 acres burning close to the coast, and that along with the Canada fires. So my heart goes out to everybody, and it's always something like that, but it seems like fires are just popping up everywhere, isn't it?
Oh yeah, it has to, it's part of the narrative, right? That there's global warming and this is what's causing it, and people need to wake up. There's always somebody behind the scenes making it happen, right? So that the story, the storyline fits in. So yeah, just everybody be aware that these things are sometimes set off by people. Okay,
You're
it's not
exactly
always.
right. And it makes me think about the Wizard of Oz at the end when they were finding out who the wizard really was. There was a big curtain, and they thought this Oz was all powerful and a huge, presence, and it was a little old man pulling the strings. Well, that still goes on today, folks.
Yeah.
That still goes on. But today's show is one of the biggest reasons that we do the Beacon podcast. Ari and I both have children and grandchildren. And so this topic is very important to us because, as I'm going to share with you in just a couple of minutes, I've had experience with this, and it is child trafficking and the sexualization of our children. First of all, you might be saying, well, what is child trafficking? Well, child trafficking occurs when children are taken away from their families, they're kidnapped, they're exploited. Children that are trafficked are forced into, sometimes it's work, like these, you remember back in the old days when there was no laws about, 9 and 10-year-old children
Sure.
working
Yeah.
in what did they call them? These shops,
Sweatshops.
sweatshops, yes.
Mhm.
But they're also used for sex or simply sold. I know, like in Africa and some of these other areas, mining areas, children are forced to get out and work all day for just pennies, just to support their family and for food and everything. So trafficking is any part of the process from finding them to recruiting them, transporting, receiving them. And, human trafficking involves men, women, and children, but children are at the risk the most because, number one, they're fearful. They follow instructions better. They don't, most of them don't try to escape. They're terrified. Some of these other countries, I mean, they live in poverty. They have to go out daily to find their food. They have dirt floors. They have to scrounge around for water and do things just to make money to help provide for their family. So some of these countries use child trafficking for cheap labor. But I am very ashamed to say this. This is horrible. The United States ranks as one of the worst countries in the world for human trafficking, with an estimated 200,000 incidents that occur annually. And I expect that that is much higher because not all of them are reported. And Ari, right now, the Biden administration has lost track of 86,000 children that have came across the border. Is that not horrible?
It's horrible. It's inconceivable.
And nobody's doing anything about it. That's the part that just really, devastates me. But I'd like to share briefly a little bit about what happened to some of my children growing up that really alarmed me. I mean, sometimes child trafficking is on a big scale, but many, many times it's on a small scale. The first incident I want to talk about was with my two young boys. My oldest boy was 8 at that time, and my younger son had just turned 6. And where we lived at was a rural community, in the country. And our driveway circled from the top. It came down, it was like a little dirt driveway that went around and circled around. And there was down at the bottom, you could, it was like a cul-de-sac, and you could get back on the main road. So walking up to the top of the driveway where our mailbox was took maybe about 45 seconds, maybe 200 feet if it was that far. So every morning when I got them ready, I went out on the porch to watch them walk to the bus stop until the bus came. And a lot of times, what happened is the bus would go down the hill and turn around at the top and would pick them on the way going up. So most of the time, I did not let them walk up there till I saw the bus go down, and I knew within 2 minutes it was going to be coming back up. So that morning, the bus went down, and they were almost at the top, maybe about 50 feet from the top. I saw a Corvette
Oh, gosh. Oh, no.
stop at the top of the driveway, and I really couldn't see who was driving because it was my son was at the very top of the driveway and he was blocking the view of the driver's side. And my younger son was only halfway up. And I know that they were talking. I heard them talking for maybe about 15 seconds. I saw my son hold his hand up towards his brother and turn around and say, "Run." And they ran back down and the car took off. And I said, "What happened? What happened?" And my son said, "Mom, I don't think it was a woman. I think it was a man that had a blonde wig on and had long fake fingernails and a lot of makeup on, but there were two of them. And they said, 'We've got a bag of candy. We'll take you to the fair.'" That's what they were trying to do. And my son immediately thought, "No, something's wrong with this person. They don't look right." But we had always told him not to talk to strangers. So thank God I was out there.
Oh, for sure. No, the thing is, what an amazing child to have remembered, whatever you taught them, the don't speak to strangers, I mean, oh my gosh. I mean, not some, there's a lot of children, unfortunately, that even though they are instructed by the parents, don't speak to strangers, they still get lured by curiosity. And it could
Right.
be candy one day, it could be a little bunny the next day, or a little kitten, or it could be whatever. Your father, your mother are in the hospital. Let me take you, whatever.
Right. These people are very
Wow.
deceptive. And
Mm-hmm.
there are so many children. That is one of the places that children are abducted quite frequently is getting on or getting off their bus stop. So parents, if you're listening right now, you watch your child get on that bus. You watch them. You watch them when they get off the bus. And I don't care how old they are, because there have been 14 and 15-year-old girls that
Yeah.
have been abducted at the bus stop. So the rest of that story is that a few days later on the news, I heard of another child abduction attempt while she was waiting for her bus. It was a little girl that was 8 years old.
Gosh. So they were targeting kids in
They
the
were
school buses.
targeting kids in the rural areas. And thank goodness these parents also had told the little girl not to talk to strangers, and they were also watching. So after that, people were just like shocked, like, what's going on? I know this was not women. These were people dressed up like a woman with a wig on so nobody would get a description, and they were tempting children with candy. And the other account, I have had a teenage daughter. We had a family friend that we had known for years, and he went to a church, very religious. Always would, when he would come over, he would have his Bible with him. Very nice. And he didn't have any children of his own. My husband had known him his whole life. Well, that summer he started saying, I don't have children. He said, but I like to do things for children. And he said, I would love to give you money so that you can buy your daughter a boom box or a gift, because I know you said she made all A's and I would love to do this. And if she needs any school clothes, I will pay for all of them. And we thought, well, how nice is that? How nice is that? And I thought, well, I'm not going to let you take my child anywhere by yourself, so that's just not going to happen. But he came over that weekend and he said, I know you didn't want her to go out, but so I just bought her one. And he had, this, back then we called them boom boxes, but it was just like a portable,
Portable radio
a
with,
radio,
yeah, yeah.
yes. And it played cassette tapes. That's what I was trying to think of.
Mm.
It's been that long ago. And so my husband was outside. We had horses. He was working on the horses and talking to William. And my husband was really busy. We didn't even know that he was going to come over. My daughter was outside playing, and I was with my younger son in the bathroom because he had to go to the bathroom. So I wasn't outside watching everything that was going on, but all of a sudden I heard the kitchen door fly open and I heard footsteps running through the house. And then I heard my daughter saying, Mom, Mom. And I thought, what is going on? So I ran out of the bathroom and I ran towards the sound, which happened to be in our bedroom.
Oh my God.
He had chased her and was holding her down on our
I'm
bed.
shocked.
Yes. And she was terrified. And I said, you take your hands off of her and you get out of my house right now. And I yelled for my husband. I've never seen someone exited from property that quick.
Oh my God.
That quick. And so his
And
excuse outside was, he said, I would never do anything like that. He says, I'm impotent. I would never do anything like that. And I thought, what a sorry excuse. And so he was never allowed to our property again. We found out later from talking to other people, this is something that he did time and time again. He went out after neighborhood children and tried to buy them things, tried to finagle his way into being alone with them. I'm sure he was going to try to sexually abuse them.
of course, of course, pedophiles are just everywhere, and now they're emboldened because of the internet. They've all I've mentioned it before. It's just a big club. They're all talking to each other. There's I believe Instagram now has been caught in at least making it easy for pedophiles to communicate with each other. And they use these, believe it or not, the Pizzagate thing was real.
It was real.
It was real. They're using the pizza symbols in just different ways. Of course, it doesn't really look like a triangular shape like a pizza, but they've formed it in like a little spiral type of thing, and it's their symbol. And if you put that, I guess, in your profile or whatever, they already know who you are and what you're looking for. It's really sick. I have a story too about possible child abduction with my own children.
Do you mind telling us about that?
Yeah. So I was, I guess my oldest at that time was 4, and the middle child, because I had a child after that, was 2, and she was in the stroller. We were at the mall, and back in the day, when they were younger, things were not as bad, of course, as now. Internet wasn't even around at that time. But I was at the mall. I was just sitting down with them, feeding the younger one. And I don't want to use names, to be honest with you.
Right.
But yeah, I was feeding the baby. And I notice a guy, and I can't remember, what ethnicity. I mean, I know he was a black man, but I don't know if he was dark in skin because maybe he was Hispanic, or if he was a Black American, or I don't know. But I noticed that from afar that this person kept staring at the children. And that kind of like literally the hairs on my arms just stood up like that. And I stopped feeding the girl, the baby, and put the stuff away and made believe as if nothing was happening, and then just picked up the kids, put the baby back in the stroller, took my son by his hand, and walked towards a security guard and explained the situation. And at that point, then I didn't see him anymore because I actually felt him following us as I was walking away,
Oh my
looking for
gosh.
a security guard. Something what I'm trying to say is that there is something that mothers tend to have. Maybe not all mothers, but there's this sixth sense, right? This ability to have a connection with or a special awareness of the surroundings. It's almost like I was a lioness at that point, and as soon as I felt, first of all, I had to feel the eyes staring, right? Because the mall is full of people. Um,
Right.
and then all of a sudden I see this person staring at the kids, but it was a very unusual stare. It wasn't like just, oh, what a cute kid, it's like, no, this was deliberate stalking. Okay. And
Oh wow.
basically trying to find out where the opportunity was. And it wasn't so much like to steal my purse or anything, because usually I kept it in the diaper bag. So what was there really to steal except probably a child? So yeah, that was my first and only encounter. I also encountered in the same mall. My kids were very, very attractive as kids. As a matter of fact, they used to model. Also,
Oh
at
wow.
that time, I would not have put them in that situation, but I didn't know that, about,
They would be
pedophiles.
targeted, yeah.
Didn't know about that. So they would play in this little center area where all the kids would go in, in the actual strip. They would play there. And I noticed at one point there was a particular person, a man, taking pictures of my boy.
Oh
Yeah, just
no.
taking a lot of pictures. And then I looked at him and I go, "What are you doing? Stop that." And then he took off. He took off. So they take pictures of your kids unbeknownst to you, right? And then they post them, and if they take, if they're lucky enough to take them. There was one very famous kid, Adam Walsh, I believe his
Right.
name was, that happened in a Sears store in Florida. And that was during that time too. And so I was very cognizant of what was going on, and in that sense, be protective of the kids. So, but I was not aware of pedophile rings and things like that. That became later, as I got older. But yeah, that was very, very scary. But again, as a mother to other mothers out there, especially younger mothers and even grandmothers, you have to develop that sixth sense. You always have to think, that there are predators out there. Your children are so vulnerable and they're so innocent. They are exploring their world, they're discovering their world, and they don't know what's right or wrong at that point. They're learning. And so if you have somebody that comes in and has an incredible imagination, and can lure that kid into that imagination, into that world of theirs, and whatever that might be. It could be Winnie the Pooh. Hey, I got Winnie the Pooh. Do you like Winnie the Pooh? And lure them in and start telling them stories, and hey, they become likable. And, the next thing you know, your kid is, being trapped into the world of certain pedophile or pedophile ring, or they may be kidnapped and you'll never see them again. So just develop that sixth sense. Always think, and unfortunately, I try to teach people, to always walk in faith, and you have to walk in faith, and know that God is protecting. But at the same time, God is protecting because he empowers us, that we are also protecting of, right? But we're protecting of our children, of our most vulnerable, which could include, you know, even your little children, which could be your animals, right? So they're depending on you to look after them. And so the same thing, you have to develop that sixth sense and have the courage to either speak out, scream, scratch, you know, punch, whatever it takes to defend. And I was willing to do that. I just, you know, made believe that I wasn't scared and pretended, hey, I didn't see you. I'm just going to go ahead and keep looking at the stores. And that's what I did. I just kept walking as if nothing had happened, but I walked a little quicker. I walked a little quicker. I found a security guard and then, you know, told them what was happening.
That was the right thing to do. And I can't agree with you more. And I think the problem is that a lot of times, as we know, sadly, these people that go after our children are family friends. They're a lot of the little girls, well, and boys too. It's a boyfriend, it's an acquaintance, a male babysitter, or a stranger, you know, like, oh, I need a babysitter. Let me get my next door neighbor, and they don't really know them.
Yep.
And they leave them alone. And oh my gosh, I've read so many horror stories about even 3-month-old babies being raped and tortured. Now, on this show, this is difficult for us to talk about these things, but we are adults. And if we don't talk about them, then something could happen and you can't change it once they're attacked or tortured or sexually abused. It haunts them for the rest of their life and does terrible damage, and
Assuming they live.
assuming they live. And
Mhm.
so who are the ones that abuse these kids, traffic these kids? It could be anybody. It could be family, it could be your father, it could be your neighbor, it could be people in religions. There's a lot of sexual abuse in the Catholic Church with priests and children. I mean, so much that they pay out millions and millions of dollars because priests have molested little boys and girls. And a friend of mine once told me, he says, the pedophiles go where the children are. So that would be in places of authority like teachers,
Mhm.
church, modeling agencies. I mean, there's just a slew of places that they hang around. And you have to remember this. This is a grown adult and your little child who is innocent and who doesn't know any better. Not, you know, they just, if an adult says, oh, well, yeah, I've got to pick you up or I'm going to give you a surprise, just know that later what happens, they say, if you tell
Oh,
anybody,
that's
I
right.
will kill your parents. I will kill your whole family. That's almost always what they say. So think of having to carry that burden as a little child. It's horrible. Another group of people, in which I know you're going to talk about, so I'm just setting this up for you, are the Satanists.
Oh
The
gosh.
Satanists are involved in trafficking.
Mhm.
And I'm very happy at the end we'll talk about the movie The Sound of Freedom because it's going to highlight on a lot of this. Ari, would you talk about the worldwide pedophile networks? Because I know that they communicate with each other in secret ways, and talk
Mhm.
about some of the things that they have done and how they're hiding in plain sight, so to speak.
Oh my gosh, do I have to talk about this?
It's
This
horrible, I
is it
know.
is pretty bad. Um, I have to tell you one of the things that I've noticed too that well, it's not that I've noticed. I mean, it's out there, right? It's that the child trafficking, yes, you know, happens sometimes with people that, you know, the child knows. And a lot of it is sometimes the own parents, right? The parents will sell the child into trafficking because they need money. They need money to pay the rent. And we're talking about, of course, maybe poorer countries. You think, you know, even maybe a family that is living in poverty, that they need to pay the next bill, they need to pay the rent, and so they make the child feel like, you know, you'll be helping mom and dad, or you'll be helping mom, if you're willing to do this for us, and that will, benefit the whole family. And so it puts the child, they kind of guilt trip the
Guilt
child,
trip. Yep.
yeah, to participate in that. And they think they're doing good because they're helping the family. They love their family, and they're willing to do that. And so that child, of course, does this, right, for the family. And in terms of the satanic thing, so where do they get their children, right? A lot of them get them from poor third world countries, Haiti, Ukraine at this point. There's wars. There's a lot of wars going on. So these children are displaced. Situations where there are earthquakes or natural disasters, the kids are displaced. And, where are the parents? The parents might have, died in the process of maybe bombings or whatever. So there are kids all over the street, and you have buses come in and, or little vans come in, and they just, hey, we're going to take you to a good hotel. We're going to give you hot food, a place where you can, be safe. And the next thing you know, those kids just disappear. And I know that's happened with, as a matter of fact, Tim Ballard, who is part of the Operation Underground Railroad, which is the movie that, where Jim Caviezel plays Tim in the movie A Sound of Freedom. So this is what this is all about. But he's now involved with Ukraine in trying to save the children from there, rescue those children from child trafficking, because a lot of them, I mean, thousands and thousands have disappeared. I think they were going to go in to save a couple, and I believe that Mel Gibson was there. Maybe he was shooting another film. I don't know the story behind it, of how Mel Gibson originally was in Ukraine, but he reached out to Tim and said, hey, listen, there's a lot of children here that need help. There's kids everywhere, and they're disappearing. So I believe that Tim contacted the Ukrainian government, which then told them, hey, we've got like 10,000 missing right now. We don't know where they are. And so Tim Ballard went over there, and then that's how Mel Gibson got involved in, filming a 4-part documentary on rescuing these children. So what I'm trying to get at is that there's a huge market for children. They're fresh meat, and not just necessarily food wise. They're fresh meat for the consumer, which is the sex addicts that want to have sex with children. So you're going to
Even organ harvesting too.
organ harvesting. I mean, last show I kind of went over as to the multi-purposes, right? Children have multi-purposes, right? Which is, of course, the sex, satanic rituals. They harvest the adrenochrome. They harvest the organs, and once they harvest the organs, usually that's the end of the child. I have a and I'm going to go right back. I know I'm going into tangents, but it's just one thing leads to another in terms of what I need to speak about. But there is some kind of like an organization. I don't know if this is 100% accurate or if it's true. It looks like a pretty legit document that I'm looking at. It's CYM is the name of the organization. So it's the CYM Caring Corp. And it looks like it's a Ukrainian-based company. And this looks like some kind of a letter or something to a client with respect to adrenochrome. So they're selling apparently adrenochrome to somebody. And it's talking about the different types of blood types that they can get, like if it's the A plus or A plus plus, 100 milligrams of that is $1,920
Oh gosh. Would you
okay.
tell everybody real quick what adrenochrome is?
So, well, I'm not an expert on it, but it's it's like a hormone that's produced when a person goes into that distress situation that's produced by, I believe, the kidneys or the adrenals.
Right.
It's a flight, the flight survival type of production of hormone that is given, and it drenches the blood so that it gives you the ability to fight or flight type of thing. So when a child is extremely tortured, frightened, whatever, he starts or she starts producing this into the blood. This, when it's taken in by a human being, like in the, they take the adrenochrome, they ingest it themselves, they get into this really like a high, almost like LSD type of trip. And so that becomes extremely addictive. It's extremely expensive. All of the elites tend to purchase this for a lot of money, obviously, and the Hollywood crowd is into it as well. This is like really very bad stuff. So this is one of the products that is taken. But yeah,
And
so
they don't
yeah,
even want to know what they do to these children to scare them that bad. It's horrible what they do
yeah,
to the
no,
kids to make that happen.
it's really bad, because hey, that it has to be talked about, right? I understand that a lot of people may not want to hear this, but unfortunately it's the truth. This is what's happening to the children, so that I want you to, like Tim Ballard does, the reason that he actually goes into these dangerous situations, because he does, to rescue children, is because he places the face of his child into the faces of the children he's going to rescue. So it's like, how can I not, I'm just going to give you an example. So how can I not rescue Timmy? Timmy is in there. Timmy would be his child, let's say.
Right.
Timmy's there. I mean, how can I not go in there and rescue him jeopardize my own life to be able to get him and get him free and have him have a better life? I don't want him to have that kind of life. I'm going to go in. So that's what he does. He superposes the face of his child into the children he's going to rescue. So it's the same thing. You've got to know what's going on. There's a lot of files and emails that have gone back and forth through John, the John Podesta. What's that other guy?
Right.
There's
Tony, his brother.
Right, Tony. There's the one that was married to Uma Aberdeen. What was his name?
Anthony Weiner.
Anthony Weiner's laptop, to the point that I believe it was several police officers, and I don't know if it was police officers or FBI agents, actually opened his laptop. He had one folder in there that was labeled insurance policy, and that they found a lot of incriminating things against Hillary, against all these government officials and whatnot, to the point that they were throwing up when they saw stuff like that in there.
Now, they're seasoned officers that see everything.
Yeah.
So imagine how bad it was if it made them that sick.
Exactly. So what's happened is that they're going into, for example, again, like I said, the third world countries. They're getting the children there because they're very vulnerable. A lot of them are, again, in poverty. The parents are selling them so that they can survive. To them, the kid is a commodity, another mouth to feed. So why not? Maybe they'll have a better life, they think. Maybe. I don't know what they're thinking. Maybe they just don't know, or they just don't care. So that's one way they're getting the kids. The other way is through Child Protective Services. Yeah, they're separating kids from their parents for whatever reason, give me a reason, I'll take your kid, that kind of thing. And so those kids go in there, they go foster home to foster home. Assuming they go to a foster home, they're either getting raped in some of the foster homes, or they just disappear there. I believe that I read, and tell me if you read it too somewhere, that there was some, I don't know how many kids had disappeared from Child Protective Services. Have you heard anything like that? I mean,
Yes, all the time. They lose track of them in the
they lose track.
system. And when I was a social worker, I can understand, because this is no excuse, but the health departments, they have so many on their caseload that they can't keep up with all of them. They make you work long hours, or, you have to, I mean, you have to write a report after each incident, but your caseload maybe is supposed to be 30 a month. They'll pile on 150 to 200. And I saw so many kids fall through the cracks. And after a while, it becomes just like such a heavy load. I mean, they go through social workers like crazy. Some of them don't care. and they don't do their job. And some of them themselves are pedophiles. So you see how the odds are stacked up against the kids.
It's terrible. It really is. And then, so that's Child Protective Services, and then orphanages. That's another place that, this happens as well. I don't know if you're familiar with a case that happened many years ago. And this happened in the outskirts of Europe. There was I believe he was a doctor or a surgeon. He went into orphanages, and the kids that were between 8 and 9 that were kind of not adopted, because that was maybe an age that wasn't really, that, popular. It wasn't, whatever. The kids that were not, the especially in East Europe, especially the little girls that seem to be a little bit more attractive. Okay, this guy, I don't even know how to even articulate this, because it was, when I read about it, it was so sick that I was really the information is so sickening that I was sick for days, and it put me into a bawling situation, because I just can't even imagine how this is even possible. But did you ever see a movie called Boxing Helena?
No, I didn't see that one.
Okay, so I'm gonna remember how we always talk about predictive programming, things like that.
Right.
Okay, so just remember that's the name of the movie, Boxing Helena. So what this guy used to do, he would adopt he adopted the first girl, and they thought she was going to go to a good home because he's a surgeon or whatever. Anyway, what he did, he created this thing called real life doll. Real life doll, and that's a thing. It's called Lolita Slave Toys. He
Oh,
surgically removed her limbs. Okay, so all she was a torso and a head, and so and so he would bind all the limbs and whatnot, and until they would heal, and dress her up and stuff like a living doll, and take out all the teeth for what kind of purpose. Um, and he started a business called Lolita Slave Toys, where he would sell these girls with no limbs, and all they were sex objects.
oh my
For
God,
30
that
to
is horrific.
40,000, 30 to 40,000 a pop. That was back then. I don't know.
Wow.
Yeah, and of course, I don't think that's going on, at least with this guy anymore. I don't remember if he was apprehended, whatnot, but this is a thing. And the reason I found out about it was because there was a picture of the Dalai Lama, and this was on Twitter, and now it's no longer. I couldn't find it. I was trying to pull it up to be able to talk about it today on the show. So they took it down, but it was a picture of the Dalai Lama sitting next to one of these supposed girls with no limbs, no limbs. And
Oh
apparently she
my
was one of the
God.
rescued ones. Yeah.
Well, that you brought up the Dalai Lama, I just want to say,
Oh God.
anybody
Yes.
can abuse a child. Recently, it was in the
Yeah.
headlines that the Dalai Lama had a young boy, and this was being filmed, and he tried to get the young boy to stick his tongue in his mouth.
Hmm. Yeah.
And then later he apologized and said it was just a joke or something. That was horrible.
I know.
Priests, pedophiles, dioceses, even popes. I mean, you mentioned, or I think you wrote me about, it could be either political party. It
It could
could
be either.
be, it could be a, it could be a doctor. A lot of doctors abuse children. It could be anyone. Anyone could
Yep.
abuse a child.
Police officers, judges.
Police
I mean, it goes on. The
officers.
list goes on. It doesn't discriminate. This disease of the mind, this sickness, this perversion doesn't discriminate in terms of position, in terms of anything.
Look at
Religion
Jeffrey
doesn't matter.
Epstein.
Yeah.
All of his victims were anywhere from 9 to 14. I mean, he had older ones, but those were his main target age.
Hmm.
And not just for him, for all the people that he brought to his island. Because why? He used that to blackmail people.
Yeah.
I mean, the Podestas went there, Bill Gates. I mean, it's just funny that a lot of his guests are people who have been accused
Hmm.
of pedophilia.
Yeah, yeah. There's so the higher in terms of going right back and to the satanic aspect of the whole thing, and it's not all about Satanism. A lot of it is the satanic rituals that are done is keeping this sickness in place, okay, is what's happening. So, but not all the pedophiles are, practicing in the satanic realm, like, the ones that are the head of maybe institutions or the head of corporations. But there's this morning, as a matter of fact, I heard a testimony from a guy named Ronald. I think his last name is Bernard. Um, and he was like in the like high in the corporate world of banking, I believe, financing and banking and whatnot. And he had some kind of contract with the Satanists, or these people that gave him all his success. No different than the Hollywood people, right? Because when you decide as a Hollywood person that you don't want to participate anymore, somehow you just automatically have a heart attack. Gee, oh, he died. He just, overdosed. He jumped the bridge, that kind of thing. And believe me, a lot of these people just don't do that to themselves. They're done. They're taken care of. But this particular man had reached a very high level of success in that industry, in, again, finances, I believe. He was then approached by his handlers, hey, you've already reached a certain level. Now we want to get you into the highest level. And in order to do that, you have to attend our parties and kill children. And
Uh,
that was it for him. He said he basically refused. And so his life then became a living nightmare, where they were threatening not only his life, the life of his bloodline, okay? His whole family, his children,
wow.
it's everything, his parents, his whatever, whomever was alive. He had to flee the country and go live somewhere else separate from his wife and children so that they couldn't be found. And he was without seeing his kids for 11 years.
Oh
This
no.
man is a testimony. And as a matter of fact, I would love to, if anybody goes to shatteringthematrix.com, I will put that video there, so that you can all hear from the horse's mouth what this man went through, and how he can't even speak when he's talking about this, because it's so horrible to him that he was even involved with these people. He said, I was under a contract with them to get me to where I was. So I did everything they said, that they set out for me to do up to that point. And then when they asked me to go the next step, I just couldn't do it. And had I done that, then I would have had a blood contract. Then yes, if I just didn't
Oh,
continue. Yeah. So he talks about that, about the satanic stuff. And then there's another guy in that same video named James J. Parker, and he was involved in a family of satanic ritual abuse. So this thing is like generational satanic.
yes, some of these kids are born into
Mm-hmm,
it.
mm-hmm. And so there, he says that they start the abuse from all the way up to 6 years old. They abuse you, they rape you constantly, they torture you, and what they're trying to do, and this I know because I didn't have to hear it from him, because I know, because I work with these the higher forces that are overseeing this satanic program to dismantle it. Okay, so they are trying to disconnect. Uh, they're trying to break the pattern in the subconscious of a small child, so that they become disconnected. And so by being disconnected, first of all, they're disconnected to God, right? To their God
Right.
source. And then second, they become numb.
They're
So they're
desensitized.
completely desensitized, so that it's a lot easier for them to do things to others. So it's just generational. You just pass that on and you pass it on because there's no remorse, there's no consciousness involved. And that's what they do. So they traumatize the child to be able to get him to become an automaton with no feelings. And that's why it's so easy to have people like Klaus Schwab, a Soros, and then now his kid is taken over, apparently, Alex Soros. So you pass that on, you pass it on to Alex Soros, will then eventually pass it on to his child, and everybody is able to pull the lever and yes to transhumanism, and yes to this, and yes, abortion, absolutely, because we need the parts, we need to have our adrenochrome. They can do that. They set up all these they do the social engineering where it totally collapses society as we know it. There's no God involved anymore. And that's how they do it, because they pass it on and on and on.
It's
And so,
horrible.
yeah, it is horrible. He also stated something very interesting. He stated that his mother told him that 12% of America was generational satanic. So,
Oh my goodness.
12%, that was back then in 1965, that equated to about maybe 40 million people.
Oh gosh, no telling what it is now.
Exactly. So
That's horrible.
we have a horrible fight here on our hands to be able to dismantle this, right?
And the thing about it is, it's really it's bad for little boys as it is little girls, because I'm sure you heard about some of the things that happened at Bohemian Grove, and pedophilia was rampant there. They had a lot of children trafficked there. They would have hunting games where they could
Yep.
hunt down the children.
Mhm.
They put them in cages. And I listened to testimony from a photographer who was hired by whoever at the Bohemian Grove to document stuff and photograph. And he testified that he saw them do this, that he was the person that took photographs, that knew these boys, and they told horrific stories. Some of them were allowed to be killed, tortured, all for the sport of these politicians. And don't think that it can't happen. It happens more than you know about. The photographer said that late night in the White House that a bunch of these young boys were taken for a tour in the White House. Now, I suspect they were took there for a reason. And it wasn't just to see everything that goes on, but these elitists, they have parties and they have events where they bring in these young boys and they can pick and choose who they want. Is that not just, can you imagine being that child?
I really can't. I mean, I cry. I really, I just can't even sometimes watch these videos without sobbing, because it's like, how can anyone be so evil, you know, that you would hurt, you know, a little innocent child? I mean, how do you do that? And again, it comes back to the, you know, how do you say that? Desensitization, if I
This,
could only say
yes, yes, that was good.
when that happens, especially if you're satanic, abused satanically, with these rituals as a child, and you no longer feel anything. So it doesn't matter, that now you grow up, you're powerful because you are initiated into the club, and
Right.
now you're out there with a gun, hunting children because, hey, why not? It's
And
another creature.
and the sad thing is now a lot of these children that are sexually abused, they grow up themselves to be abusers. And I had a family member, very, very young family member, maybe not even quite 2 years old, that was in the presence of someone that was abused horrifically as a child. In fact, the social worker told us that it was so horrific she couldn't even give us the details. And what they did, this family member came home after staying overnight with the mother and the boyfriend who was the abuser. And this child had big bruises all over their chest and their legs, handprints. It was horrific. And this baby, he was only 2 years old. he could not put in words what happened to him. So I had to go through that whole court case, with this child. And I'm thinking,
Hmm.
I just hope this doesn't come back to haunt him when he gets older.
Oh, but it will, right?
It will. It
Yeah.
will. It always has
Yeah.
consequences. But, this is a awful thing.
It
And
is.
we
It
don't
is.
apologize for talking about it, because 5.5 million children are trafficked worldwide.
Mm-hmm.
And like we spoke about, it's not just for sexualization, it's for
Mm-mm.
labor, organs. It's also for child marriage. And we didn't
Oh,
even
that's the
talk
other one.
about
Oh,
that.
yeah.
We'll talk about that with our next part. But I
Yeah.
knew we wouldn't get everything
Oh
done
no, we
because
can't.
this is so big.
This is not even, we're not even touching the tip here.
Right.
But just as an aside, because people need to understand why this trafficking is happening, is not only for satanic purposes to keep this dark paradigm in place. What we're looking at, what we're experiencing now in the outer world, what we're seeing with all this transsexual phenomenon, the transitioning of children, the mutilation, all that. All this is just a result of, right, everything that is being created because of these rituals that are being done with children. But it's a business, right? It's a business. Somebody's making a ton of money from this, and
Right.
they're estimating that it's about a $32 billion business.
Wow. Oh my
32
gosh.
billion. Organ trafficking is approximately 1.7 billion. So when you put the two together, now why children? Why sex trafficking, right? Is because it's more lucrative than drugs, than selling and trafficking drugs. It's more lucrative than the arms trade. It's more lucrative than any of the businesses. Why? Because those transactions maybe happen once, or maybe they come in back again, but the child can be trafficked several times during a day.
They can. And they're almost helpless to fight back. And
Right.
so, gosh, that just wrings my heart just to think about that.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're out there and you know of someone who might be trafficked, or you think that they're sexually abused, or maybe it's a parent that's into child pornography, you can report missing children or the pornography to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children at 1-800 The Lost. That's 1-800 843 5678. So you can do that. You can also text the National Human Trafficking Hotline, and I'll put all of these numbers in the description box. You can get involved with these organizations by donating money. Educate your children. Sit down and have a talk with them. Give them a code word. A lot of children, the school is supposed to know who can pick your child up. But what if they're on the street or getting off the bus or something? They need a code word that only you and the child knows. And if that person doesn't use the code word, they know, run, run. You can also fingerprint your child. There are organizations that will send you a little card where you can fingerprint your child as another way of tracking. If they were took to a location, they can check for fingerprints. Know your children's friends. That's a big one, isn't it,
Oh
Ari?
yeah. Oh, big time.
Right. And
Yep.
monitor them on social media.
And your neighbors.
Yes, your neighbors. So there are all kinds of things that you can do. We'll post all this information in the description box, and we'll go more into them on our subsequent shows. But Ari, you have done a fantastic job with educating people about just how terrible sexualization of children is and how it's damaging our kids.
Yeah.
I just want to thank you for all
Well,
the research that you did.
no, this is important. This is something, this is all, as Biden says, your children are our children.
Oh, I just wanted to slap him,
Please.
Mary.
Oh my gosh, don't get me started with this guy. I also wanted to state that people can go to the ourrescue.org, our rescue.org. That is the site for Operation Underground Railroad that Tim Ballard started, the one that's being portrayed by Jim Caviezel in The Sound of Freedom. The reason I'm asking you to go in there is, first of all, if you have the funds to be able to donate, that would be wonderful, because that helps them to be able to go
Yes.
and go on these missions that are very, very risky. But also they have courses that you can take to help you identify child trafficking and sex trafficking, which is really important, because now, we all are empowered. We can make a difference, right? It's not just we have to wait for somebody to rescue. No, we can be the eyes and ears, the boots on the ground as well. And the more of us that are out there in a way to be vigilant of what's going on and aware and have that inner sixth sense, like I had to have that day so that my children wouldn't be taken from me, we need to do the same, because really we are the parents, we are custodians of the planet, and we need to take care of our children. And these are, my children, your children, doesn't matter whose child, they're the innocents. And this is the only aspect of godliness, the closest thing to God that we have, and they're trying to destroy that.
Amen. And our next show, we're going to be talking about how they are coming after our children through products, through schools, through programs, through the transgender stuff. Any way they can introduce the topic of sex with children, even masturbation for children as young as 4 and 5. So don't miss our next show. And remember to like us on BitChute, Rumble. We have a Facebook page now for the Beacon Podcast. I'll put that link up. Share our shows. Put the information out there. Be part of the voice. It's not just me and Ari. It's all of us. We can all do something.
Be part of the solution, please.
Well, thanks everyone for listening to the Beacon Podcast. We'll be back again in 2 weeks. And tell us your stories. If you have something you do to protect your child, put it below in the comments. We want to know. We want to get the word out there. Because if you just save one child, gosh, you have changed the world around you. We all need to do that. So everyone have a great week, and we'll be back in a couple of weeks. Thanks, Ari.
Thank you.
You have been listening to Deborah Jane East and Ari Kopel on the Beacon Podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe to Rumble, BitChute, and YouTube to catch our next episode.